Thank you so much for coming to this charity talk and the support of Japan. And there are so many events going on today on campus, and I'm so glad to see so many faces here on this charity talk. Just a month ago, the magnitude 9.0 earthquake struck northern Japan. And I still cannot believe that all the things I've heard from the news are really happening in Japan. And so many people's life and destiny were forced to change instantaneously. Over 13,000 people passed away, 14,000 people are still missing, several towns just disappeared underwater. Earthquake triggered tsunami, and tsunami caused explosion at Fukushima nuclear power plant. Just yesterday, Japanese government announced the threat level of this power plant is 7, which is the most severe category. And it will take over decades for Japan to recover from this crisis. But I'd like to mention that America has given lots of support and effort to Japan. And under Operation Tomodachi, American Army is providing technical support to this nuclear plant and also conducting search and rescue throughout northern Japan. So I'd like to thank you, all of you guys here, and I'd like to start this charity talk. I'm not planning to make this charity talk too sensational, because exciting talk by Dr. Tsutsui and Dr. Stam are coming up. But before that, I'd like to talk about earthquake drill in Japan for 5 minutes, and then I'll introduce 2 professors, and we'll have question time after that, and a closing ceremony. So the question is, what should we do when we have an earthquake? This is not just rhetorical questions, it's a real question for Japanese. And as Japanese, we have to answer this clearly. So here, this is pictures of earthquake drills in preschool and elementary school. The earthquake drill is always held every semester. When earthquake hit, the first you hide yourself under a desk, like this one, and then go to the safest place, usually the gym of elementary school. And then at this earthquake drill, usually firefighter comes with this interesting truck with image of roofs. So here there's a kitchen, and then this truck can shake this roof, and then the firefighters teach you how to do when earthquake hit. So before you meet your first boyfriend or girlfriend, you have very nice reflex action to earthquakes. So in high school, even high school, university, as long as you're in school, you need to do this earthquake drill every semester. Here's my family's case. My family is living in just a suburb of Tokyo, and then my home is right there. And there's City Hall, one university, one elementary school around my parents' house, and they become shelters when earthquake hit. But my family's case, we are supposed to go to this elementary school, and my parents always told me that if you're separated by earthquake, leave a message on dial 171 and meet at this gym of elementary school in 3 days after earthquakes. This is when we didn't have cell phones, so that's the way to meet parents. And I had an instruction that if they didn't show up, what would we do? And all the instruction in the backpack, and I'll show you the backpack later. So dial 171 is a little interesting phone numbers. It's a bulletin board of voice message, and available only for big earthquake. Usually says magnitude 6.5 or larger, and volcanic eruptions, which is also a very common natural disaster in Japan. You can record your voice by dialing 171 and then following the instruction. Usually type push 1, and then push your phone number, and you can record your voice. And then later, other family members can hear your message by dialing 171 +2 and phone numbers. And this is the way you get the message from your family, because usually when earthquake hit, many people try to call the people living in that area, and then the phone lines get really, really busy. And so this is a way, and a private phone company providing this service. And here's a backpack, and I told you before. So this is a backpack about this size, 30 to 40 liters. And each of my family keeps this backpack under the bed. We have passport inside, helmet, radio, and then some biscuit, medicine, the heater, and then this white one is masks and bandage, and have dried rice, of course. And here's newspaper. It's not the newspaper to read, but it's a newspaper to wrap up yourself, because newspaper is very warm. We also keep water at home. The bottled water is a very special one. It lasts 5 years. And we have outdoor toilet and a flashlight and the candles. Everything's in a backpack. And there are 4 family members in my family, and there are 4 backpacks in the all under the bed. And that's how we avoid the disaster of earthquake. And if you want to come to Japan in the future, decades later, probably Japan recovered from this crisis. If you come, better to prepare for the earthquake. Maybe have a little backpack with potato chips and others. So thank you so much. That's all from me. And now let me introduce Dr. Tsutsui. From the business, economy, to even pop culture. He's very famous for a book called Godzilla books. He's known as Godzilla Professors. And his talk is on April 11th, plus the future of Japan personal reflection. He was in Tokyo when earthquake hit, so he's going to give us a talk about his experience.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be here this evening. I appreciate being asked to speak, and I'm just thrilled with the large crowd we have this evening. It's a real testament to the organizers of the event and all the hard work they've put into it. Can we have a round of applause for them? Well, tonight I thought I'd first say a few words about my personal experience of the earthquake in Japan. And I apologize, I think probably a lot of you have heard these stories already. In the week after the earthquake, I was sort of like one of those dolls where you pull the string, and the same story keeps spewing out over and over again. So I told this story on just about every TV station and radio outlet that would stick a microphone in front of me. And of course it was also on the blog on the SMU website. So I apologize if I repeat myself. But after talking about that, I think I'll just reflect a little bit about the challenges facing Japan in the wake of these multiple disasters over the past month. Well, first, the personal story. I think, as a lot of people know, I was in Japan in March as part of the Japanese American Leadership Delegation, which was a group that was sponsored by the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs. There were 13 of us from across the United States that were going to meet with Japanese business, political, and education leaders. And on that fateful Friday, we were in our tour bus, and we were just pulling up in front of the New Otani Hotel in central Tokyo. And the doors to the bus opened, and all of a sudden we felt a little shake. and I think all of us felt it was a mechanical problem with the bus. But the shaking continued and got more violent. And as we looked around at each other, we noticed that outside there were groups of people running out of the hotel. First just a few, but then waves after waves of people were coming out of the hotel. And the shaking became quite violent. The bus was moving back from side to side. And I've been in Japan a number of times before. I've lived in Japan. And so sort of the run-of-the-mill earthquake is nothing new to me. And it was clear that this was no run-of-the-mill earthquake. We all then began to look at the buildings around us, because while we're in an open space, we were right in front of the hotel, and we could see that the concrete overhang was sort of going like a wave on top of us. And as we looked back around our shoulders, we could see the skyscrapers, both close by and in the distance, were swaying quite violently. And one of the things that really struck me is on one of the nearby buildings, and it was a low-rise about 4 or 5 stories high, there was a window washing crew out on a platform suspended from the building. And I suspect there are few more terrifying places to experience an earthquake than hanging off the side of the building. Honestly, in the wake of the earthquake, I didn't have a lot of sense about me to study what happened to them, but I did notice that their safety chains had rescued them. But I'm sure they had one heck of a story to tell. As soon as the shaking stopped, and the shaking lasted what seemed like forever. I mean, I think that was what really was striking to me about this earthquake, was how long it lasted. We were all pretty stunned, and I think it was amazing. You've got 13 Americans on a bus, all of us with every form of technology known to man strapped to our bodies, and not one person during that earthquake thought to, videotape it on their iPhone or, pull out their camera or anything. We were just transfixed. The guy across the aisle from me on the bus, who was a business executive from California, turned and said, "Didn't that remind you of a Godzilla movie?" It was a weird thing to say at that moment, and yet it did actually remind me a lot of a Godzilla movie, because I couldn't really think of what other analogy I would use. In the days after the quake, I heard lots of people describing it as being like standing on Jell-O, or being in an airplane that, all of a sudden is losing altitude and you feel this sort of nothing under your feet. Yet being on that bus and being shaken and seeing all these conservatively dressed Japanese people running in fear out of buildings really did call forth those memories of popular culture, of growing up, watching apocalypse in Japanese films and seeing it in Japanese anime and so forth. As I mentioned, I've been in Japan a lot. I've been through a number of earthquakes in Japan. I usually describe an earthquake in Japan as being sort of a relaxing experience. That lying in bed and having a normal sort of minor Japanese earthquake is actually like getting a free massage. So for me it was not, this was not something particularly scary. When I was a student in Japan in the early 1990s, we had quite a large earthquake one day at the university. This must have been about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I was sitting in the main reading room of the university library, and all of a sudden the building began to shake. And I was pretty concerned, because that building was built in the late 1920s. It was a brick structure, and there were these huge chandeliers, iron chandeliers, hanging over the reading room. And as the building shook, those chandeliers really started shaking pretty good. And I remember at that moment looking around, and all the other students in the library were also looking around, and there was this moment of peer pressure. Nobody wanted to be the first one to dive underneath the table, okay? Because your friends are never going to let you forget this. And so none of us moved. At that moment, I thought, boy, if the big one ever does get me, it's going to be because I'm too ashamed to do what I know what to do when the training should be kicking in. I'm just sitting there like a fool. And in fact, that's what did happen on that day in Tokyo. In the moment, you always think when the earthquake comes, is this going to be the big one? And then it is the big one, and you don't know what the heck to do. You're sort of petrified, and you watch it happening around you. What was amazing is that in the immediate wake of the earthquake, how quickly things, at least in Tokyo, seemed to return to normal. There, of course, was no visible damage directly around where we were. No windows out, no bricks down, nothing falling from the skies. Everything remained intact. Most people, the first thing they did, of course, as you would do, was take out their cell phone, Okay, they tried to call their family. My cell phone worked perfectly. I emailed my wife. I thought if I called her in the middle of the night in Texas just to say I'm fine, she'd kill me when I came home. So I just sent her an email saying, big earthquake, I'm okay. The Japanese people there, a lot of their cell phones were knocked out, but they just, dusted themselves off, got back, straightened up their clothes, went in to work again. So we decided, since we're at the hotel, we were going to meet with the Business Federation. We went ahead and had our meeting. They were actually very impatient with us because we were upset by this event. They just wanted to get straight down to business. And in fact, we were 15 minutes into the meeting when the first big aftershock hit. Okay? And at that moment, that is when my training came in. And with all the other Americans in the room, I just ran for the nearest door, and we were out in the garden like that. And it turns out that as we went out into the garden, we actually walked through the Zen rock garden at the hotel, where they have that nicely raked to look like little waves of the ocean, and we left footprints across it. And you could see, as we were leaving, the hotel staff, which did not move, they were not looking happy about this. But I guess even they realized that under the circumstances, walking in the garden was okay. It was only much later that anyone really in Tokyo recognized how bad the after effects of this quake were, and especially the effects of the tsunami in Tohoku. Really, driving around Tokyo afterwards, one very much had the sense that the worst impact was in terms of traffic jams, because with the train service knocked out, traffic in Tokyo was absolutely appalling for the next 12 hours. And in fact, we ended up ditching our bus very soon and walking across town to our hotel and then walking out for dinner afterwards. We all looked very hard for damage. And really, again, as I said, there was very little to see. What really struck me as being a sign of what had happened is that everyone who had their bicycle on its stand, and especially this is true in front of railroad stations, whereas in Japan there are many bicycles lined up, had fallen over after the earthquake. And it seemed like a subtle thing, but that really was the only apparent change that had taken place in Tokyo. Now for me, one of the abiding memories of those first days was actually not sleeping at all. For 2 days I didn't sleep, and over 3 days I think I had about 4 hours sleep. Part of it was simply the stress of being in this situation. Part of it was being the sort of need to get information, to watch what was going on around Japan and around the world. But part of it also was speaking with the media. Because one of the things that SMU does best, I think, is work with the media and promote our experts on campus to the larger world. So one of the things I did probably about 3 hours after the quake was to email the publicity people here on campus and say, well, by the way, I'm okay, and if you want me to talk to anybody, just let me know. Little did I know they would literally have me talking to everyone for 48 straight hours. The most impressive thing about having gone through this experience, and I think anyone who was there will tell you this, was how calm and dignified the Japanese people were in the wake of the disaster. It was really amazing to see the composure of a nation at such a difficult and stressful time. And as I told a number of the media, from my hotel room I could see, I had a very nice vista over the traffic in downtown Tokyo. There were traffic jams for 12 to 14 hours. I mean, bumper to bumper, gridlock, nobody moving, nobody going anywhere. In that time, I heard people blow their horns 3 to 4 times. Okay? It was just stunning. You could hear that many horns a second in New York City on a good day, right? Okay, but in Tokyo, in this moment of incredible national stress, people were remarkably relaxed and incredibly patient. I mean, part of it, I think, you can explain by just looking at the media. When I was in Japan, I watched NHK, I watched the Japanese national broadcaster. And from watching NHK, one gets this very sort of calm, measured, sort of technical sense of the crisis. It's presented in a lucid fashion. There are lots of charts and graphs. It seems like there's an engineer in charge of everything. And so you feel kind of confidence watching Japanese newscasting. It was only when I came back to the United States and started watching CNN and Fox News that I really felt worried, because there everything is breathless, everything is hyperbole, the world is ending, if it hasn't just ended, and so we have to be prepared. In Japan, I do think they have a better handle on giving people the data, because honestly, the kind of information that was being presented in Japan was no different than what was coming through American cable news, but just the tone was so very much more comforting and professional, in my opinion. I'll say, from my perspective, I actually was impressed by the response of the Japanese state to this disaster. I know there's been a lot of criticism of the response of the Japanese authorities, but I think given the scale of this disaster, simply the physical extent of what was happening, the Japanese state certainly did an adequate, if not good, job in getting supplies where they were needed, getting the information out that needed to come out in the short term. One of the things that struck me in particular was the Japanese state was very